Let me call this to order. Welcome to a beautiful, beautiful occasion this evening. As you can see, I'm your master of ceremonies, and I'm not Whoopi Goldberg. I'm not even Billy Crystal. But it is a night to bestow honors and Oscars, and we tried to get Mr. Oscar Boudreau to come, but he couldn't make it. We invited someone else. This is the biggest Hebert family reunion I've ever seen. I think the Broussards are going to have to eat their heart out tonight. We thought they were prolific. I hope I can set the tone for this evening's great event by making a few comments. We are here tonight to single one of our outstanding citizens of our community, to showcase him for the person he really is, the humanitarian that we know that he is. While this type of adulation, Dr. Hebert, may be a humbling experience for you, there is no doubt of the sincerity and admiration that we all want to exhibit tonight, which is obvious by the number of people and the turnout we have here tonight. When we as citizens honor someone of our own, like you, we honor ourselves. We can take comfort in knowing, though, that in a brief passage of time, we put aside all of the distractions we have and our selfishness in order to recognize someone truly deserving like you. We ask that you bear with us this evening, and for the next hour or so, cast your feelings aside of humility and modesty so that we may in good conscience honor ourselves by honoring you, Dr. Hebert. In doing so, and before we start, it's always protocol to have an invocation. On your program, you see we have the pastor of St. Teresa Catholic Church, one of our great religious leaders of the community, and the pastor of that church. We call upon him for his cellular connection, Reverend Marty Borshany.
Let us ask our God to be with us this evening as we invoke his name. Heavenly Father, it is truly good that we're here to honor someone so important to many of us, and someone with such great energy and vitality. We ask that you bless us as we congregate here this evening. Bless the reason that we're here. Be with us throughout this evening and throughout the days of our lives. We ask that you bless Dr. Hebert, a wonderful, wonderful man, as we all know. Give him strength. Allow him to keep that energy that is certainly his trademark. We ask that you bless each of us here as we make up this community here of Abbeville. We ask that you bless the food that we ought to share and the company that we sit next to. We ask this and so much more in the name of your Son, our Lord and our Savior, Jesus Christ. Amen. In the name of the Father, the Son, the Holy Spirit. Amen.
He has heard that so many times. It functions like this and others, but this evening we got him captured and he's not going. You know, whenever you start a program like this, you have the task, if you're going to coordinate the program, of trying to introduce distinguished guest and head table guest. And if I try to do that tonight, I may not be distinguished but extinguished, because I'll probably leave somebody out. I'm going to suggest to you that I'm going to read simply the committee members who did a yeoman's job in putting this function together, as you can see, and ask your forgiveness for not introducing all of the public officials and head table guests. I think it's important, though, that you know who put this together. Aubrey Blanchet and others a couple of years ago got together and said, we need to honor Dr. Hebert. And we did it. We got a whole bunch of people, and we named them. We brought them down to the meetings at the hospital. Ray Landry did a remarkable job of calling everybody with the general and said, we're going to put something together to honor someone who is truly deserving. something unlike we've ever done in this community, Dr. Hebert, and we really, really are pleased that we were able to do it. Let me list you the number on the people on the committee. Not in order of importance, by the way, so that I don't do anything that's not politically correct. I just happen to have Cecil Picard's name first. Donald Segrera, Police Jury President. Second, Aubrey Blanchet, who's one of the greatest movers in this committee get-together. Purvis Pee Wee Moe, Dr. Sudduth, Perry Sudduth, Dr. Robert Young, Dr. Brian Army, Mark Army, Robert LeBlanc, Donald Primo, Emery Sonnier, Lloyd Campisi, Ray Landry, Willis Hebert, Sheriff Ray Lemaire, Mayor Brady Broussard, Dr. Edwin LeBlanc, Revis Sermon, and N.R. Broussard. And those are the committee people, Dr. Hebert, that put this function together for you this evening. Out of those and out of others, we have many anonymous donors who came up with the funds to let you have a meal and not have to pay anything. Isn't it great to come to something like this that you don't have to put up some money for? Many of our group are anonymous donors who wanted to stay that way, but we do owe them a debt of gratitude. I want you to know that they are all good team members, and we always had a good coach, and Ray Landry did a good job for us. I guess one of the things that got us all together every week to put this together, where they kept minutes of every meeting of what we were doing, was the fact that the hospital provided a meal at every time we went. And so you had good attendance at almost all of the meetings. And so tonight you'll partake of that meal, and it's going to be served now. Enjoy yourself. We'll start with the program right after the meal. But I think it would be remiss of us in honor of Dr. Hebert, so that he can see the great length of support that he's got for his humanitarian efforts here in Vermilion Parish and all over Southwest Louisiana, and sometimes in Pecan Island. I almost was going to introduce everybody who hunted with Dr. Hebert, but then that would be everybody would have to get up. Then next I was going to ask everybody who has a camp in Pecan Island at this head table to get up, and that would be everybody. So that's our second domicile, and I think Dr. Hebert is going to see something of that later on in the program. Anyway, we have, I'm sure, several members from the school board, the city administration of both all of the villages and cities in Abbeville, the police jury, the hospital, who incidentally did a great job of putting this meal on for us. Thank you, directors and everybody, for the meal. That was great. Donald, Ray, and all of you. Let me ask all of the elected and appointed public officials to stand up, please. Just stand up momentarily. We won't name anybody, and I understand, you understand why. Thank you. Look at this. Those of you who are running for election this weekend can stand too if you want. Okay, Jill. All right. All right. Some of you get to stand twice. Okay. If I was really politically correct in the old days, and Dr. Hebert would understand this, I probably wouldn't be here. I'd have to introduce the home rules on this side and the machines on that side. But anyway, we're not going to talk about political correctness tonight. We're here for a great occasion. Our first presenter tonight is someone that is always politically correct, someone who is a good friend of mine, and I told you at another function we had in this very building several weeks ago that he's phenomenal. Every time you go to a function, you see him. He's like Dr. Wanmug's time machine. His territory, and we always use it in political campaigns, from Maurice to McNeese is what we use. But he goes all the way to Port Arthur, all the way south of Lafayette, part of Acadia Parish, a lot of Acadia Parish, and all of Vermilion, of course. But you go to a wedding and he's there. You go to a funeral and he's there. You go to a graduation and he's there. You go to a civic club function and he's there. You go to a school function, he's there. I'm talking about from Lake Charles, Cameron, Cadia, Vermilion, Jeff Davis. I went to confession the other day, and I think he was there. He knows everything I do, so that's why I think he was there. Please help me welcome our Senator, Senator Cecil Picard, for his responsive comments and the privilege of introducing the governor.
Thank you, Charlie. And when you go to the polls, I'll be there too. It's certainly indeed an honor and a pleasure for me to be here tonight and play a small part of this function. This was started, as you heard, about 3 years ago. Looks like it would never get off the ground, but now the seed that's been planted 3 years ago has come to bear fruit tonight, Dr. Hebert. Our special guest that I was asked to invite to be here to share this with Dr. Hebert tonight. If you saw the program, it's broken into 3 parts. One is family, that is so dear to him. The other one is medical, that's been his life. And the other one is political, because he has served as coroner of this parish for some 20 years. So the special guest that we got from Baton Rouge has been to Vermilion Parish many, many times before. As Charlie said, he was here just a few weeks ago to honor and to support a candidate for re-election, Mayor Brady Broussard, who did go in without any opposition, right in this very hall. And he's been to Vermilion Parish time after time as a congressman, as a governor, 4 times. He's been very good to the citizens of Vermilion Parish. But they've been good to him too. And you know, after every election, the political experts and all of the pollsters still can't figure out how he gets 40,000 votes when there's only 30,000 registered voters in Vermilion Parish. And I haven't figured it out either. But 1972, true story, Dr. Hebert is at the country club playing golf, and somebody comes from the club and says, "Hey, Doc, yeah, and he was getting ready to putt. The governor's on the phone. Well, he says, listen, tell him today's my day off, I'm playing golf. Tell him to call me tomorrow. Dr. Hebert thought it was somebody in the clubhouse, a fellow doctor, somebody playing a joke on him. So he played his round of golf. He came in, he got a soft drink, and he went home. The next morning, as he always does, got up real early, went to the hospital. About 8:30, the phone rings, paging Dr. Hebert. Dr. Hebert, the governor's on the phone. Well, then this time he says, I better take it. So he went, and the governor says, what's the matter? You don't want to talk to me? He says, well, what do you mean? He says, well, I called for you yesterday on the golf. They told me you were on the golf course. It was your day off. He said, well, I thought it was one of my friends just playing a joke on me. True story. At that point in time, he asked him if he wanted to be the coroner. At that time, that was under the old Constitution, and he wanted to know if he wanted to be the coroner to fill the unexpired term of the coroner who had passed away. So he said, well, I'll take it under one condition. He says, I'll take it to fill the unexpired term, but that's it. I'm not running. Well, he has been coroner ever since. And they have, yeah, let's do it. And they have been good friends ever since, in fact, not just politically, but personally. Because last year, Dr. Hebert usually invites me to go to 2 or 3 duck hunts at his camp in Pecan Island. Last year, it was getting toward the end of the season. He hadn't called for me, so I decided I'd call at the camp. And they said, oh, Dr. Hebert's in Alaska. I said, in Alaska during hunting season? He said, yeah. I said, well, the only thing I can see, he's on another hunt. And that's what happened. The governor had invited him to go polar bear hunting in Alaska. And so they flew into Anchorage, and the governor had been on many of those trips before, but not Dr. Hebert. They flew into Anchorage, and they got a little plane. This was little seaplanes with one pilot, and he takes them out there in a remote area, and he says, okay, I'll pick you all up in 3 days. Now remember the rules. You can only take out 1 polar bear, 1. Don't worry about it, the governor says, okay, bye. 3 days later, the pilot lands, and here, ho and behold, they got all the gear ready to go. and there's two polar bears out there stretched out. So the pilot says, well, which of the polar bears y'all want to bring in? So the governor says, well, both of them. He says, remember what I told you. You could have one polar bear, you can't have two. And so the pilot says, well, I got a problem, because he says, I can't be outdone. The governor says that last year they could bring two out. So he doesn't want to be outdone by his competitors, so he says, okay, put them on the plane. So they put both polar bears on the plane, they take off really slow, 20 feet, 60 feet, 90 feet, 100 feet, and they crash into the snow. And Dr. Hebert gets out and he says, hey, Gov, he says, how far did we get? Governor says, about 200 yards further than last year. So these two guys have been through a lot, and certainly our governor needs no introduction. I took his resume and I just compacted, but to just say a couple of things that I think are very important. One is that he has the distinct honor of being the only political leader in the United States to have served at all three branches of government, the executive, the legislative, and the judicial branch, and all three levels of government, which is local, state, and national. And that all started, as we know, in Crowley when he served as Crowley City Judge ad hoc. He served on the Crowley City Council, the Louisiana State Senate, U.S. Congress. He served briefly on the Louisiana Supreme Court in 1980, and then he was elected governor 4 times. He's also the only chief executive in the history of Louisiana to garner more than 1 million votes, which he did in 1983 and again in 1991. In addition to that, I would say that some of the things that stick out in my mind the best is that we had an archaic, outdated constitution that we were gone by 1921, and he was elected in 71, started serving in 72, and immediately got to work in redoing this whole constitution, in addition to hundreds and hundreds of boards and commissions that needed to be reorganized and to be streamlined. That took a lot of doing, and with a lot of help from a lot of people, but he orchestrated that over a period of about 2 years. The other thing is, I remember in 73, is that he foresaw what was going to happen in the oil patch and convinced the Louisiana legislature the manner in which we collected severance taxes on a flat rate rather than a percentage. As a result of, in a special session, that happening, that has brought billions of dollars to Louisiana citizens, instead of them having to pay taxes like many of the other states have had to pay and could not afford, like California had to even go to a proposition in order to reduce their taxes. But that has happened over a period of years, and that has helped the state time after time after time. The other thing that I remember would be probably during the toughest, I was not born during the Depression, but they tell me that I remember that probably during these times, he was able to pass something that no other state in the nation can say that they have, and that is pressing for a constitutional amendment that gave us the trust fund that we have $600 million. It could not have come in a worse time for budget cuts and restraints in this state, but still the importance of passing a trust fund of which only the interest can be used, and that is being utilized through grants at elementary, secondary, and higher education. $600 million is a legacy to leave for future generations. And like our honoree tonight, he's kind of like the rabbit on the Duracell battery. He just keeps going, going, and going. Please help and join with me in welcoming the governor of the state of Louisiana, Governor Edwin Edwards.
Thank you. Please remain seated. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Et je suis le seul homme électé comme gouverneur qui parle ta langue, qui mange les écrivains et qui sait où île de Picard. And I'm very proud of it. I'm proud of my Cajun heritage, and I'm very proud to be back here with you. As Senator Picard has said, I've been here many, many times in the last 24 years. But this is a special privilege for me tonight because it's the first time that I've come here that I wasn't asked for something by the police jury or the city council or the mayor or Picard or Theriot or the sheriff or somebody, and I'm glad to be here.
Very nice.
But you deserve it. This has been a great, great place, and I'm very proud to have been so closely associated with things that have happened in your parish and in your area during the past 30 years. I noticed with a great deal of delight in coming here, once again, all the new businesses around LA 14 bypass and the progress that you're making here under your mayor. I did come during his qualifying time to do what I could to help him get reelected. The night that I came, he had no opposition. I endorsed them. The next day, 2 people qualified. And then he called me for money to take him out the race. I don't know what he did with the money, but they got out. But he is a good friend, and I'm very proud to be back here with you tonight. Years ago, in a small town, when country doctors were just that, country doctors, and we are witnessing a vanishing breed in Dr. Hebert, there was an old doctor named John Smith who practiced in a small community. He had a small, unaudacious office upstairs. He climbed the stairs every day to go to his office. People, as he served the community, getting up at all hours of the night, he presided over the birth of practically everyone that was born in the community for a long, long period. He was available at the beck and call for the poor and those who could not pay. Many times he treated people for nothing. He was a constant, steady influence in the community and the source of their only medical attention. And of course, as this man is tonight, he was beloved of the people in his community. Often in his later years, as he got older and had a hard time climbing the stairs, his friends would say, "Why don't you let us get you an office on the ground floor?" But he was so interested in his practice and serving people that he said, "No, I'll stay in the office that I started because that's where people know where to find me." He had a very small office plaque that designated the location of his office. Well, as circumstances happened, later on in years, he passed away. And on the date of his funeral, they were all assembled, the entire community, at the graveyard to determine what to put on his tombstone. And a little girl walked up and handed the mayor a plaque which she had taken from the doctor's door, and it said simply, "Dr. John Smith, upstairs." Ardly, a long time from now when that happens to you, and it's going to be a long time because I'm not letting you go till I get out the governor's office, they will be able to take your sign and hang it appropriately and say simply, "Dr. Ardly Hebert, upstairs." We are good personal friends. We don't see each other that often, but I never come to this community without talking to it. And I assume, BB, he never comes to Baton Rouge without talking to me. But I am very privileged tonight because 22 years ago, when I asked him to accept the position as coroner of this parish, he agreed to do so and has served you so well that you have re-elected him all these times, and he's still serving in that capacity now. I'm very pleased to read this proclamation, which I would like to present to him. Whereas Dr. Ardly Joseph Hebert received his medical degree in March of 1944, and whereas in 1950 Dr. Hebert returned to Abbeville where he began his private practice in general surgery, whereas Dr. Hebert practices medicine at the Palms Hospital in Abbeville and in Abram Kaplan Hospital in Kaplan, whereas Dr. Hebert became a member of the active medical staff when the Abbeville General Hospital opened in February of 1966 and is still very active in Vermilion Parish, whereas Dr. Hebert continues to make, quote, house calls, quote, when needed, Whereas Dr. Hebert provided free care to countless patients over the years who were unable to pay for health care themselves. Whereas Dr. Hebert continues to provide prompt health care to the elderly and the indigent in this area. Now, therefore, I, Edwin W. Edwards, Governor of the State of Louisiana, do hereby proclaim March 23, 1994, as Dr. Ardly Joseph Hebert Day throughout the state of Louisiana.
Thank you.
Sit down. Not right now. Not right now.
Thank you, Governor. The next part of the program is additional proclamations or commendations by other public officials. But I would, at this time, and I know his name's been mentioned, but I, at this time, would like to ask Aubrey Blanchet to stand because he's the one that planted the seed that reaped the fruit that we're enjoying tonight. Stand up, Aubrey. Just 1 second. That's the guy who did it, right here. I, too, have a commendation from the state of Louisiana, and I would like to read it. It's not as long, so it won't take long. It says, on motion of Senator Cecil Picard, hereby extends its heartiest congratulations and commendation to Dr. Ardly Hebert for 44 years of charitable and caring devotion to the welfare of others as a surgeon and 22 years of unselfish public service as a coroner. Dr. Hebert.
Thank you, Senator Picard.
At this time, I'd like to call on my colleague, Representative Sam Theriot, who brings greetings and also a commendation from the Louisiana House of Representatives. Sam?
Well, while we're thanking everybody, I'd like to thank the ladies who cooked the food. It was absolutely great. And I'd like to thank him for allowing me to be their poster child. It's very nice of him. I want to publicly acknowledge to Dr. Hebert how grateful I am after all these years that he never ran for representative. I want to thank him for that. And when I look at the crowd here, I'm pleased that he didn't. As I have the honor bestowed upon me, and I speak for not only myself, but for another good friend of Dr. Hebert's, Representative Ted Hike, who sends his acknowledgments, his letter of regrets that he cannot be here, but he asked me to go ahead and represent him this evening as well. I want to give something to Dr. Hebert, but I had lunch with Dr. Hebert. He knows how to get to people. He takes Cecil hunting. That's how he gets to Cecil. You notice how he gets to me. He takes me out to eat. He knows what to do. He knows how to push the right button for everybody in this room, and that's why we're here. We had lunch together the other day, and I acknowledged to him, without letting him know of this evening, that there was something very special about him that I was going to introduce and unveil. And I know that Father Marty will not mind me doing that this evening. You see, I'm going to give him something political. But as a deacon of his parish that he attends faithfully, I want to give him something that's even more meaningful. I wish I would have had this framed. When I was growing up, and since I've been growing up, and I guess I haven't stopped growing, all of you out there have always said to me, and Governor, you'll acknowledge this, one of the role models of a good public servant that you can follow in his footsteps was your father. And I say to the young doctors who are listening out in the audience that one of the great role models that you can follow, as the governor so eloquently put it, was this man we honor tonight. Few doctors can boast of his accomplishments, not just surgically, but as a humanitarian. There have been times when people have been rushed into the emergency room, and he was there, and I was there, and I remember that, and I thank him for that. He's a role model for all of us, but he's much more than just a doctor, and much more than just a friend. He's a deep-rooted man who believes in his God and gives him great thanks for the talents that he's bestowed upon him. Those of you who attend St. Teresa Parish Church, as Dr. Hebert and his family do, will never see his name on the back of this bulletin that has been printed thousands of times. But if you look close enough, you will see clearly the message and the slogan of one Dr. Ardly J. Hebert. And so I hope I don't unveil his secrecy tonight. But if you look close, you will read in this box, week in and week out, I do the surgery, but it is God who heals you. And I think that speaks well of the man that we honor tonight, much more than just a doctor, a lover of people and of his God. And that's what I appreciate the most in him. So tonight I bestow upon you, on a motion by Representative Sam Theriot and Representative Ted Hike Jr., the heartiest congratulations and commendation unanimously approved by the Louisiana House of Representatives on this March 23, 1994, to Dr. Ardly J. Hebert for outstanding and unselfish humanitarian efforts and works towards the people of Vermilion Parish and Louisiana as both a practicing physician and surgeon for 48 years and as Vermilion Parish's coroner for 22 years. Signed, the Honorable John Alario, Speaker of the House. Dr. Hebert.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you, Sammy. Next, the Vermilion Parish Police Jury President, Donald Segrera.
Thank you, Cecil. Dr. Hebert has always been very highly thought of by the police jury members. 10 years ago, when I was elected to the police jury, I knew Dr. Hebert, but I didn't know him as well as I know him today. As I continue to serve on the police jury and work with Dr. Hebert, I continue to know him better and better. And the better that I get to know him, the prouder I am that I know him. Like Father Marty said in his invocation, he is truly an outstanding individual. On behalf of the 14 police jury members, I'd like to present Dr. Hebert with this proclamation. Whereas the Vermilion Parish Police Jury wishes to recognize one of their own citizens for their contribution to the life and prosperity of Vermilion Parish. And whereas Dr. Ardly Hebert has served the people of Vermilion Parish as family doctor, surgeon, coroner for 22 years, hospital service district commissioner, and businessman for the past 44 years. And whereas Dr. Ardly Hebert has distinguished and given of himself for the people of Vermilion Parish and the state of Louisiana. Now therefore be it resolved by the Vermilion Parish Police Jury that Dr. Ardly Hebert be honored for his distinguished career, and do hereby thank him for his service to his community and state, and do hereby proclaim Wednesday, March 23rd, 1994 as Dr. Ardly Hebert Day in recognition for his outstanding and dedicated service.
Thank you, Donald.
Next, we have Mayor Brady Broussard representing the city of Abbeville.
Hi, everybody. I want to do something a little unusual right now before I commend Ardly. Usually a public official takes credit for things they do and things they don't do. But I need to correct something. In the paper this morning, it was mentioned that I was the organizer of this. And in fact, when the paper called me, Chris Graffia called me, I said, Chris, it was, has been acknowledged, it was Aubrey Blanchette's idea,
and he talked to Senator Picard and I one day going to one of the camps on Pecan Island, and the only thing I did was to organize the first meeting, call the first meeting. I said, let me get a list of the people on the committee, and then you could show who's on the committee. He said, well, Mayor, I will get that from somebody else. I think he said he was going to call Dr. Ami. He may have called, but I wanted to clarify that. I certainly do not take credit for organizing this. It's a lot of people, and I needed to say this. I hope it's appropriate, but it's the truth. In behalf of the City Council, Dr. Hebert, I would like to read a proclamation that your friend Betty Cormier and Rochelle and Pam helped the council and I put together. Everybody else read their proclamation without glasses, but here goes. Whereas on the 23rd day of March 1994, the residents of Abbeville, as well as Vermilion Parish, have gathered to honor Dr. Ardly Hebert with a Lifetime Humanitarian Award. And whereas during his long and distinguished career, he has demonstrated in countless ways his devotion to medicine and his dedication to the people of our community. Whereas at one time or another, we have always all been touched by Dr. Ardly's hand and his heart. Whereas he is a comforter, a supporter, a healer, a master at the art of healing. And this phrase comes from my daughter, Darby. Whereas he has earned the respect of the affection of all people from all walks of life and all ages as a physician and a true friend. And whereas he is humble and compassionate individual who is willing to place his concern for people ahead of his own personal interests, and whereas he has dedicated a lifetime to caring for the sick, the injured, and the dying of this community with the highest degree of professionalism. Now, therefore, I, R. Brady Broussard, Mayor of the City of Abbeville, do proclaim March 23rd as Dr. Ardly Hebert Day. Thank you, Mayor.
Are we going to have to come back here next March 23rd and do this again? I want to know. I'd love to do it, and I hope we do. Congratulations, Dr. Hebert. All of those are well done. I was trying to find a way. You ought to see the plaques and the proclamations in this setup right here. They're all over. They're falling out. Sammy says that Dr. Hebert gets what he wants done. He takes some hunting in Pecan Island. And I guess it's easy to do that when you take him to Pecan Island because you're one-on-one in a duck blind, and all you got there's a gun. Somebody else who has a gun. Remember the song when the lyric said, I shot the sheriff, but I didn't shoot the deputy? I told that to my secretary today because I wanted to make sure I had the lyrics right. She said, that's an old song. I said, yeah, but people at this banquet are going to remember that. Anyway, I didn't shoot the sheriff, and I didn't shoot the deputy either, but Ray Lemaire, our sheriff, got away, and I guarantee you he's still alive and well today. But if you want to buy a gun now, according to our federal people, and take another shot, you have to check with him first. Unless, of course, you go to New Iberia. To comment on the political aspects of Dr. Hebert's career is our High Sheriff, Ray Lemaire.
Good evening, everybody. Doc? Mighty good to be here with you today, I guarantee you, sir. Governor, good to have you with us also, and ladies and gentlemen. You know, I was supposed to talk about your political aspects, and I think they've pretty well covered that territory already as to when you became coroner and how long you've served as coroner. You know, my first dealings with Dr. Hebert began when I was a state trooper many, many years ago, and working the road here in Vermilion Parish. And the only time I met Dr. Hebert at that point in time was, it was either at a fatal accident somewhere on the highway, one of the highways in this parish, at the scene of a suicide or of a homicide, and that's all I knew of Dr. Hebert. It wasn't until that I was elected sheriff that I really began to realize just everything that a coroner does. I had no idea that it was so involved. I thought that you only saw him when you were dead, if you could, see that forehead. But Dr. Hebert quickly impressed on me what his duties were, and I was very, very willing to learn everything that I could possibly learn from him, not only politically, but from him as our coroner. He not only has to tend to the people who meet unfortunate deaths or natural deaths or what have you, but he has a lot of things to do with the people that are very distressed in our community, such as drug abuse, such as rape victims, and on and on and on. We still meet on a regular basis at the same weird hours that we've always met, but now it's for different reasons. And it's not only for the dead people. Now, he'll call me up at night and say, I have a problem. What can we do about this? Or I'll call him and say, I have a problem. What can we do about this? But we always seem to be on the same wavelength when it comes to those common problems that's going to affect my department, he as a coroner, and you as the citizens of our parish and the citizens of our state. The prisoner situation, for instance. It's a very serious situation, as Governor Edwin can attest to. We're very fortunate, we're blessed here in Vermilion Parish that we have a nice facility and we have things going our way. But the abuses that, say, inmates will do to get away from that prison are unbelievable. I mean, they'll feign illness, they'll do all kinds of things just to get that free joyride away from their cell block. I can understand that. Dr. Hebert can understand that too. So some year ago, we collaborated with Dr. Hebert, and we came up with a book that makes War and Peace really look like a nursery rhyme, which is a standing orders manual. And what this does is simply he's got standing orders in this book, which is given to a nurse that comes to our facility, Nurse Tuchet, which allows him, because of the certain symptoms on minor type illnesses, to go ahead and prescribe, or not prescribe, but to give certain medication to compensate for that. Well, let me tell you what, how great this thing works. Very seldom now do we have to take an inmate. I have to take a unit off the road and put an inmate in it, bring him to the hospital, bring him to the doctor's office, and Lord knows where, because they have some little minor thing wrong with them. Now we can do it right there in-house. You can't imagine the thousands of dollars in medical expenses that it saves our parish, but also the thousands of dollars that it saves just in the manpower implementation that I have to shift people around and take them off the road where they should be protecting you. So, Doc, thank you for your help in that, and I think that's a pioneer move on your part. Saving bucks. Let me tell you what, this man here is coroner. You can't believe some of the stuff he gets on my case or somebody else's case immediately. When he feels that I'm doing something or that anybody else is doing something that's going to spend your tax dollars. This guy is phenomenal when it comes to that. And it's good of friends as we've become over the years. He don't mind telling me in a hurry that you need to maybe look at this or maybe do that, and then we have to really sit down, usually over lunch somewhere, and we'll compromise. So that's where I got on you, Sammy. He takes me lunch and he takes me hunting. He's got me from both ends, both of my loves. And Doc, I think I can safely speak, for I see a couple of our chiefs of police here. I have some of my officers here, some of the state police is here. I think I can safely speak for this group of people in our law enforcement community and say thank you very much for everything that you do for us. After I took over for sheriff, Dr. Hebert quickly went from being just a coroner to being one of my most trusted friends. And like I told you before, we speak often. We have lunch together, we speak on the phone, or he comes out to my facility, which he still makes house calls, folks. He's still out there. He comes to my facility rather than me having to bring these guys all the way to his office all the time. He'll come over there and we'll hold a sick call in one of the cells over there and provide him with the security he needs, and I tell you what, that saves us a lot. And thank you again, Doc, for that. We don't always agree on everything, but we always sit down and talk it over and reach a good compromise. When I go to Doc's camp, as many of you in this audience does all the time, Doc is always up front when we're in that blind to teach me the finer points of surgically removing a green-head mallard from the sky. He does that very well. He's not only a gifted surgeon with a knife, but he's hell with a gun too, let me tell you that. And of course, I'm very quick to teach him the finer points of cooking them and eating them. Doc, congratulations on your brilliant medical and political career, and most of all, thanks, Dr. Hebert, for being a humanitarian and my friend.
Thank you, Ray.
Thank you, Sheriff. We were talking about guns a while ago, and the Sheriff reminded us about that, and Sammy did too. It reminds me of a time when years ago, Dr. Hebert and myself and others had a lease in Brady, Texas. And I didn't think about it till just tonight, but you know, we always think of him as all of the good work he's done here, but he's a real ingenious type hunter too. He's an outdoorsman, as evidenced by what he does in Pecan Island, but you don't think of him as a real big game hunter like in Brady, Texas. Every year he came back with his limit of deer, and he didn't do anything but ride around in his Lincoln Continental. And we always wondered when we went there, because we went for a whole week and scouted the place and did everything we needed to do that Field and Stream told us to do. Ardly would show up there on Friday and hunt Saturday and come back home Sunday with his limited deer, and we couldn't understand why. Well, one day we were walking. Some of us were a little younger, and so we were able to walk around. He had the Lincoln. And we saw Ardly in a road where a whole big thick bunch of brush was, and he had his gun on the front of the car, his rifle, and he was standing there with a little bitty sawed-off shotgun. And we said, "Doc, what you doing?" He said, "Well, I'm fixing to kill my deer." He said, "Well, how are you going to do that?" He said, "Watch." He had a little shotgun, and he had some pop shells. I don't know if you've ever seen those things, but they're shells that shoot firecrackers up about 300 yards. He would stand in the road in front of his Lincoln Continental, shoot the pop shell about 300 yards on the other side of the brush. The deer's in the brush, see? They come out his way across the road. He shoots his deer, puts them in his trunk, and he goes home. He's got his deer. And he did that for years and years and years, and we were wondering how he was such a good hunter. We have another guy who was on that lease with us, kind of a legend in his own right, who is going to tell us a little bit about Dr. Hebert's medical career. Dr. Parish Sudduth, who will also introduce another fossil with him, Dr. R. Young. Please.
Thank you, Charlie. When we were planning this program tonight, Cecil was sort of in charge of it. And he said the program is going to last about 2 hours. He said it's going to be in 3 parts. The first is the political part. The second is the family part, and then the medical part of Ardly's life. He said, you and Sonny are in charge of the medical part. The last 2 hours, you have 10 minutes. So I'd better hurry. Back in the mid-1950s, I was a resident in surgery in New Orleans, specializing at that time, and I came home one weekend to Abbeville, and I visited with Ardly. And he told me, he said, Barry, he said, when you finish your residency, he said, you come open your office here, and we'll cooperate, we'll practice as a team, more or less. And he says, I'll help you on your major cases, and you'll help me on mine. He said, that way, he said, you'll get to know all of my patients, and they'll get to know you. He said, that way, when I retire, he said, they'll be your patients. Well, Ardly had been here a number of years. He had a tremendous practice. I was still in training. I had yet to see my first private patient. So that sounded great. I figure I could make a living on just all those Noels he had down in the 7th Ward. The only thing is that when he said when I'll retire, I thought he meant in a few years. Well, that's been almost 40 years ago. I've been retired over 5 years. He's still going strong, still treating all those Noels. But to get him here tonight, we had to promise that we would tell everybody this is not a retirement party. He's not retiring. He said he plans to practice, he says, for another 10 to 15 years. That's very good for Abbeville. If you add that up, that comes out to the year 2009. If he does that, he will have practiced medicine almost as long as Edwin Edwards will have been governor. How's your calendar for 2009, Governor? For 35 years, I've had the pleasure of practicing medicine and associating both professionally and socially with Ardly Hebert. Both professionally and socially. We worked hard, and we had good times playing, too. Many of the things he made interesting, such as in surgery, when we'd be operating together, I'd be helping him, and you might have a very tough case and having difficulty doing an operation, but the sweat would break out on his forehead, and I see his old favorite scrub nurse, Ruby LaCour, here, and one of his favorite sayings was, "Perry, or Ruby, for God's sakes, do something even if it's the wrong thing." But it always came out all right. But over the years, we've not only worked, but we've hunted, we've fished, we've played golf, even played poker together. Talking about fishing, he had a very nice boat named the Mr. Lucky. He enjoyed deep sea fishing, but his favorite was trawling for crabs and shrimp. You could always tell on a Sunday afternoon when he had been out. You'd ride down to Ivy Richard's Landing. There was a Mr. Lucky up on the waves with the trawl wrapped around one of the propellers with just a board sticking out. And we'd look at Ivy and I would say, "Yep, Doc's been trawling again." We used to play golf together quite a bit, too, and except when the governor was bugging us out on the fairway. But I remember one time we were out and we were playing at Abbeville Country Club, and we were on the 4th hole. And Ardly teed off, and he hit a real nice shot right down the middle of the fairway. But on his second shot, he hit the ball way over the green and went into the trees. And you could hear it go pow, pow. It hit 2 trees, and oddly enough, came right out on the green about 5 feet from the cup. So I congratulated him. I said, "Boy, I took some practice to make that shot, didn't he?" He said, "No," he said, a two-tree shot on this hole is not that good." He said, "Usually I get closer than that to the hole hitting only 1 tree." We also played poker together. We had a poker club played every Friday night. In fact, I see a few members of the poker club here tonight. I used to love to play poker with Ardly. I think he put 2 of my daughters through college. But not only is he a great doctor, but he's a famous raconteur. He's a after-dinner speaker, and he can tell stories better than anybody, except his brother Irby used to be able to. So I know over the last 35 or 40 years, I have at least 300 or 400, but I'm going to share just a few of them with you tonight. All his patients have always been in awe of his diagnostic ability. He had the reputation of being able to make the fastest diagnosis of any doctor in Acadiana. And that brings us to this one story. This lady had been seeing her family physician for some time with digestive difficulties and a little abdominal discomfort. And so one day he told her, he said, "Look," he said, "we're not getting anywhere." He said, "I'm going to send you to Dr. Hebert. He's real good at diagnosing these things." So he said he had his nurse call and make an appointment for the lady to see Ardly the next day, which she did. But before she left, the doctor told her, he said, "Look, before you go to see him, I'm going to give you some pills. You take these tonight, and tomorrow morning you go by the hospital. We're going to shoot an X-ray on you. They'll give you the X-ray film, and you take them with you when you go to see Dr. Hebert. That'll help him out in making your diagnosis." So she did. She went the next morning, and she took her pills the night before, had the X-rays. They gave her the X-rays, and she left. But unbeknownst to her, the radiologist, either Dr. Broussard or Dr. Gunnison here, had called and given Ardly the diagnosis of what he read on the x-rays. So when she got to his office, Ardly was sitting behind his desk, and the nurse ushered her in through the door into the room. She had the x-rays. So I said, just a minute. He said, we might not need those x-rays. He said, step back out the door like you just did and come in kind of quick. And she did. And he said, my dear, he said, you have gallstones. She said, Dr. Hebert, how in the world did you know that? He said, well, I heard them knocking together when you came through that door. He maintained his diagnostic reputation. He'd been taking care of this elderly man for quite some time. He was his patient. And one day, the gentleman got very acutely ill and seriously ill. And his family brought him on into Ardly, and Ardly had to admit him to the hospital. And in spite of very intensive treatment and care over the next 48 hours, the old man went steadily downhill, and at the end of he expired. And Ardly had stayed at his bedside the whole time, so the family was very happy, and they knew that everything had been done that could have been done for the old man. But after all that was over, one of the sons said, Doc, what was wrong with the old man anyhow? So Ardly said, now, we're not sure, but it was serious. You see why it's been a pleasure to work with him all these years? Now, this isn't his story. This is something I can attest to because it happened. One day, a man in my office said, Dr. Sudduth said, I've never met Dr. Hebert, but he must be a terrific physician. I said, well, yes, he is. I said, but you say you never met him, so why are you saying that? He said, well, 2 or 3 times a week in the Meridian, I see the little ad saying, somebody in the family, I want to thank Dr. Hebert for taking care of a certain member of my family, and he did such a good job, and so and so. I said, you mean those little ads where they say the family of the late so-and-so would like to thank Dr. Hebert and the nurses and the priests? He said, yeah. He said, he must do it just right. He even wins when he loses, you see. For any other doctor who lost 2 or 3 a week, you'd be a little suspicious about his high mortality rate. But for him, it was just another star in his crown. Another thing he was good at was prescribing for patients. He never did follow the book, but had some unusual type of prescriptions he did give. How it usually worked. He always had a very large and loyal following from Pecan Island, and in fact, as I said, I think when he retires in, 2009 or 2030, whatever, he'll probably go down there. But this one man from Pecan Island brought his 90-year-old mother in to see Ardly one day. She was a little tiny thing, weighed about 80 pounds, and very petite. So the man told Ardly, he said, Doc, he said, Mama won't eat. He said, we've tried everything. He said, we've given her this, that, and other. She won't have anything to do with it. She's getting weaker. She's losing weight. And it's going to put her in a hospital. So Ardly told her, he said, I said, you know you have to eat. He said, you have to keep your strength up. It's very necessary that you eat. So he said, Doc, I'm just not hungry. I don't like anything. I have no appetite. None of that appeals to me. So they give me this, give me that. I won't eat it. I can't eat it. So I said, now, look, if you don't eat, we'll have to put you in the hospital and feed you through the veins. He said, think of something that you might like to eat that might appeal to you. So she thought for a while. She said, well, maybe a good fresh pot-roasted wild duck. Now, this was in early June when she said that. So Ardly said, well, okay. So he told his son, he said, we'll have to get it. He said, are there any ducks down in the marsh down there? He said, well, yeah, Doc, there's a few summer mallards I see down there. So Ardly said, well, we'll just have to do it. He said, I'll give you a prescription. So the son said, well, Doc, you know the season's closed. He said, I'll go. He said, but if the game warden catches me, would you give me a paper? He said, yes, I'll give you a prescription prescribing ducks for your mama. So the fellow left, he and his mother left, and about 3 or 4 days later, he was back in Ardly's office. Ardly said, how's Mama? He said, oh, Doc, Mama's doing much better. I haven't seen Mama eat like that in 6 months or a year. He said she really enjoyed it. He said, but Doc, he said, the game warden caught me. He said, you know, you told me to give me a paper. Ardly said, look, I'm going to give you a prescription right now. Here it is. How many ducks did he catch you with? He said 183. He said 183. And what I always wanted to see was Judge Richard Putnam's face when the guy brought that prescription into his court. Already prescribed 183 summer mallets for this lady. He's also been very interested in any new developments in medicine. Anything new, he wanted to keep up, and he did. Back about 20-some-odd years ago, when the colonoscope was first came upon the scene in surgery, the colonoscope is a long, about 5 or 6 foot fiber optic instrument where you can do some operations on the colon through the colonoscope without having to make an incision, and you spare the patient a very major operation. So the first workshop on that was up in Philadelphia. So Ardly and I went to Philadelphia and took the course, and when we came back down, Dr. John Ray was one of the organizers of the course. He was at Oxner Foundation. So when Ardly and I had a patient with colon polyps or something that was accessible to the colonoscope, we would collect a few of them and then send them down to Dr. Ray at Oxner's to spare them a major operation and let him do it. They'd go home the same day or the next day. And he'd line up about 4 or 5 of our patients, and Ardly and I would make a quick trip down to Oxner's and observe him and try to pick up our technique so we could start doing it here. Well, Dr. Ray was very, very famous in doing colonoscopy, so he had a number of surgeons from around the country who would visit him. And one morning we were there with our patients, and this one very ivory tower type professor of surgery from Duke University was there. And you could tell by looking at him he had spent more time in a medical library than in an operating room. So Ardly's looking through the colonoscope. Dr. Ray had walked out of the room for a few minutes. So he asked, very pompously asked, Doctor, he said, are you familiar or have you ever used the Henson-Grunwald procedure? And I was standing there. I knew Ardly had no idea what the Henson-Grunwald procedure was. But he came back like this. And he's looking through this thing. He said, no, he says, I haven't had to. I've been very successful using the Hebert modification of the two-check procedure. Well, that kind of shut this guy up, because he knew less about that procedure than Ardly knew about his procedure. And we figured that he had gone back to Duke and spent more time in the library trying to find a two-check procedure, and much less the Hebert modification. And we thought in a few years he'll be a traveling surgeon and probably go up to Harvard sometime, and he'll be questioning the residents up there, surgeon, and said, Doctor, have you ever used a Hebert modification, a two-check procedure? So his fame spread, you see. But seriously speaking, I think that we in Ardly and Vermilion Parish have been very fortunate to have had a physician practicing here with the ability and character of Ardly Hebert. I've never seen a physician so dedicated to his patients and who gave such caring attention to his patients. His dedication and care, coupled with the trust and confidence, the doctor-patient relationship that is exhibited in his practice, exemplifies the highest ideals of medicine. If it's orthopedics, pediatrics, surgery, medicine, cardiology, OB, or what have you, he can usually do it and do it well. I think unequivocally I can say that Ardly Hebert is one of the best doctors I've ever seen.